Welcome everyone to the first Sarajevo MoT meeting. Today we have three excellent speakers. Before that, Masha from my company will just do a quick intro about the sponsor. After that, we'll have Maaret. She'll be talking about how to get better at exploratory testing. After her, we have Larry Goddard, who will be talking about how he created a test automation framework called klassi-js. And last, we have Conor Fitzgerald, and he'll be talking about a topic inspired by the modern testing principles. It's called, as testers, do we do more good or harm? So let's get started. Masha, could you please share screen with me?
Yes, I will share my screen. So hi, I'm Masha. I'm marketing specialist and UX designer from the company Takta. We are a custom software development company. We were founded in 2007. We have headquarters in Belgium, Croatia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we are founded by our current CEO called Seo Češć. We like to describe our vision and passion as breathing life into complex ideas with quality software development. And our work is powered by implementing agile principles inspired by extreme programming, test-driven development, domain-driven development, and a lot of pair programming. So our success is based on three main principles, which is technical quality, expertise, business expertise, and communication. And that's what got us more than 15 years with a lot of projects with our clients. And dealing with complexities is what our Takta name means, which is the art of complexity taming. So we have basically two divisions in our company. One is called Takta Core Services. The other is called Takta Professional Services. And the first one, the Takta Core Services, we are on the project where we take full responsibility for development and maintenance. And Takta Professional Services is something where we allocate individual experts in various domains for specific business needs. So our clients come from government agencies and big corporations all in Belgium and Netherlands. Some of you maybe know them, some of you maybe don't. They are really big companies in these countries. And a lot of it is focused on taking complex internal systems and making them into manageable and easily maintainable custom software solutions. So it's mainly about big internal systems. And also we have a lot of our projects in government industries, where a lot of those projects have real impact on the life of people who live in these countries, since we work in the area of social care, social benefits, social workers, education, and employee benefits. You can see all of this also on our website, takta.io. So these are some of our biggest projects. We had big projects for Constructive, which is the biggest organization that pays out benefits for construction workers in Belgium. We made a payment processing application. We are making of the digital student passport for the Flemish Ministry of Education. We are also making a web application for time and resource allocation management for one of the biggest telecom providers in Belgium called Proximus. We are also working on two big projects for PMV and Vivium, which are one of the biggest insurance companies in Belgium. And also we made a COVID-19 rapid test platform for Flemish Ministry of Education. But we are not just about working, we are also about our culture, and we really value teamwork and openness and a lot of transparency. So we really cherish teamwork. We really celebrate all personalities. You can also see more about our culture on our website. And if you want to become part of Takta, you can send these emails on these emails address. This also PDF will be available to you on the meetup, so you can download it and see the emails. And you can also visit our website for more information on us and what we do and everything we do at Takta. And thank you for your attention. Also, enjoy the meetup. I hope you have really good time. These are great speakers. Music is also great, and have fun. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, Masha. Okay, now let's have some fun and learn about exploratory testing from Maaret.
So I get to start this, and I'm kind of curious on what all is on the agenda. And when I was thinking about kind of what do I want to say today, I was thinking a lot on the idea that it would be just so lovely to have a conversation with people. Like, we have all these ideas and all these real life practices and real life challenges that we really need to pay attention to and kind of figure out how someone else is doing them. And there's so many stories, so many experiences to choose from. So how would I even, go about choosing for you on the advice that I would give on getting better at exploratory testing? So what I then used kind of as an inspiration is some of my real work. I've been a tester for 25 years, and currently I work in Vaisala. My title is a principal test engineer, which basically means that I get to do the same old testing work that the rest of the people do. But in addition to being expected to do testing, I'm also expected to do test management in quite a scale. I did a bit of calculation today. I've been saying that the system has 20 different teams working on it. And actually today I wrote them down and had people review them. There's 34 teams in the system. So I keep apparently downscaling the scale in which I am trying to manage exploratory testing right now. But also one of the works that I try to do is kind of improve testing in scale in the whole Vaisala organization, if I ever have time. So I usually do that by broadcasting perspectives. Today I did a bit of a preaching on test requirements and test cases, the traceability between those. It's almost like a religion in my company that people expect that. So from that context, I think the whole work that I manage, the whole work that I do is exploratory testing. And, looking at it from a bird's eye view, it's not that complicated. You need someone who will do the work. You need to give them, some devices, some maybe websites or computers to go on websites, some computers, some devices that are embedded devices, whatever the devices or, the interfaces look like. You probably need to give them some tools like automation tools, like programming tools, different libraries, whatever allows you to programmatically also handle some of those interfaces. I work quite much with Yocto Linux right now. So Linux command line and automating on the Linux command line is kind of like an everyday bread and butter in the way that I do exploratory testing. You probably need to give someone like me doing this work also some time to get some of the testing done. Probably I won't be alone. So you give me some nice, smiling, lovely colleagues. And I thank my daughter for the lovely artwork. I've been reusing this in multiple presentations so far, and kind of, some expectations of what you're supposed to do. So you're supposed to provide information. You're supposed to leave test automation behind as documentation. You're supposed to be better every single day. And it's not enough that you're better. You need to make all of your colleagues better. Not so complicated, really kind of, easy, not that complicated, complex thing. But when you have all the moving parts, when you add them kind of like, whatever goes underneath this picture, it is not that easy. And the funny part kind of like, when I try to then tell how to get better at exploratory testing is this idea that sometimes, when people think about what to do in testing, they draw these pictures. This is from John Cuttlefish from a couple of months ago. And you can see it's a really small black post-it note there. It says testing. Like his team, he described, shares certain hats. You don't need to see all the details. There's some labels for those hats, and there's different people who kind of carry responsibility of different activities. But testing is, that one little black tiny thing there. So out of this, I kind of just, wanted to set the baseline that my expectation, instead of kind of thinking of it as the one thing there, is that I can always explode it if I need to explain it to anyone on what's going on. And actually that one little thing is equally many things, kind of like the different types of roles that we might have. And when I think of myself as an exploratory tester, on some days, I'm one of these. On other days, I'm something else. And on my worst or maybe best days, I am all of these. But generally, I need to be moving between a bird's eye view and the details of some feature and some change quite often, kind of frequently going back and forth in talking about the strategy on the level of what does business need and what are the important risks, and then digging into what is the latest change and how does that change the landscape of risks that we need to work on. And sometimes I need to even operate devices. For my current context with embedded systems, it means that, theoretically, they sometimes give me the soldering equipment and they say kind of like, create your own wires. Well, obviously, I'm one of those people who kind of like, looks around on their lovely colleagues and says that, I need a wire. Anyone else feel like doing that for me? And I usually get a couple of them just by asking for it. So there's a lot of power in not just doing yourself, but also asking. So that kind of is the context of, how I think of testing. We do quite many things, and we are in the control seat of the testing that we're doing, as long as we are doing exploratory testing. So we are actively filling whatever purpose we have. So if I need to then kind of share, what do I think that makes us better at exploratory testing? I have kind of three pieces of my recipe. So first of all, we really need to understand a little bit deeper than I already kind of introduced. What is it about exploratory testing that makes exploratory testing exactly that? Then we need to have the piece of practicing and feedback. So it's actually a social activity where we learn from one another. And then we, of course, need to kind of make sure that we have all those different roles and hats and dimensions at a pace that we can manage. So we can't throw them on everyone on day one, and we can't expect every one of us to do those every single day. But there's so many dimensions in which we can grow. So I wanted to give you some ideas around that in this presentation. So let's start with understanding what's exploratory testing. I think it's now 37 years since Kem Kainer coined the term exploratory testing. And the whole word started from the idea that in the Silicon Valley, Kem Kainer, as a test manager, was watching some people do so-called smarter testing. They seemed to be caring a lot more about kind of how they were using their time and whether the use of time was providing results, whether the results were good, actively learning and doing kind of smart work around testing. And he noticed that this was different from what was then called scripted testing, which is someone creating very detailed specifications for testing and then executing them and kind of like following a plan that was created at a time when you knew the least. So he gave it a new name. He called it exploratory testing. So it already existed. It's something that's been done, well, in the Silicon Valley back then, but it was also something that was done without knowing what the world would end up calling it in Finland, which is where I'm from. So the idea with exploratory testing is that you have test design and you have test execution, and they are so inseparable that you actually don't separate them. You don't separate them by making someone else do the design and other person do the execution. You protect what I call here agency, which is the power to make decisions in the moment with the knowledge that you have at hand because you're doing the work and the attitude that goes along with that power, so that you dare to make those decisions. And that enables then the learning that helps you focus on optimizing the results in the moment. So you might look at an application and you look at it as if it was, your external imagination. And it's sort of almost like I feel like it whispers to me. It tells me what I should be doing next. And I just need to be tuned to the right frequency so that I hear when it tells me that the clicking that I'm doing right now is good, as long as I am noticing the pattern that the clicking is bringing forth. And some of the automation scripts that I'm running on the side while doing this thing, they're actually giving me a hint on something else that has been changing in my system. So the active learning is what makes it exploratory testing. So bringing these together, not separating them, and kind of I believe that what I call now contemporary exploratory testing, that actually you can't separate automation and manual for the exact same reason. If you separate automated and manual, you're taking away that agency of really good test design and ideas that come with the test execution and have an impact on the test design, and you don't actually do as good a testing as you could. So this is what exploratory testing is to me. So on the other side, kind of what it is and how people get confused by it, is that when people then talk about the first experiences they've ever had in exploratory testing, these are quite typical stories. I picked this up from Eurostar in one of the roundtable sessions. We had a conversation with 3 different people there. So kind of like, you have 3 people, you have 3 stories. And the first story was one where basically in the organization, that was like military style organization, meaning actually domain was military. They had been doing specifications, analysis, creating tests and running those tests, and that was the kind of the baseline work. And then one nice afternoon, they were invited into a session where they actually found all the results that kind of scared them on the things that they were missing in all the hard work they were doing around specification. So that kind of woke up the first person into understanding that, hey, there's this thing called exploratory testing, and it is the results that we need. That's what's expected, not just the evidence out of our testing. So kind of finding the balance and realizing you can at least, you can add some of that freedom on top. But this level of freedom, it's very limited. So it might be some people's first experience, but it's not what I mean when I say exploratory testing. The other experience was one where the test design was separated. So someone else before in the organization had created a list of test cases, and the newbie tester was handed an Excel and said, start here in the morning, and when you get to the end, guess what? Start again from the beginning. And then needed to meet someone in a meetup or a conference to hear that, hey, by the way, you have this agency, this power of learning, and if you activate your availability in that moment, you could do a lot better work. But my first experience on this space was actually already being given by my very first manager, some tests to give an example of what might I be looking at. I was given a budget of time saying, well, in about a week, you should be reporting me about these kind of things. And let's then talk about the second week after you have completed your first week. So a conversation cycle. And the customer that we were serving back then, which was Microsoft, they gave us a quality assurance on the results, meaning that about once a month, they would take the areas we were responsible for testing, sent out a more senior tester, and if they found bugs that I had missed, we lost some of our bonuses. So there were financial implications on the results. All of this was setting kind of like a nice frame to this exploratory style where you actively need to be learning and you are not just following someone else's list. So now we've talked about understanding. What does it mean to do exploratory testing? So I wanted to then give you a bit of an idea on what to do with the practice and feedback. And one of those things that I don't obviously have all of the time today is, well, I've been creating some courseware. Parveen that I saw that was on this meetup today was helping me with this course. So we've had a nice group of people, 5 of us, kind of collaborating and trying out the test target, a single test target. So if you take that test target and you start kind of like testing it and you give yourself a constraint. I have there on the outline many different examples of how you could constrain yourself. Like, for example, focus only on the data or focus only on the specification. And you will notice you will find different kinds of things. So you can use those constraints as a way of improving the way you do testing, the way you do exploratory testing. You can use those constraints on different kind of documentation as ways of improving your test documentation. And behind all of this, there's always this idea that if you have to do the thing that you think is the same on the second day, the best thing, the practical thing that you can always do is that don't do it exactly as you did yesterday. So actively come to the testing situation with the idea that you have the power of doing something just a little bit different. And it always increases your chances of serendipitously, it's not an accident, it's like a lucky accident, a positive event. You might run into something that should start a conversation in your organization about why is it working this way when we were expecting other results, maybe something that doesn't actually crash, for example, which is kind of a typical easy example. I put in the material a couple of examples on what documentation might look like. So a very typical exploratory testing documentation is kind of like, somehow like functional areas that you have in the application, like giving them some labels. And, anyone's labels are, as good as anyone else's. The purpose of those is somehow to give you a structure that is movable when you're learning. And then obviously you would have to report all the bugs. So this is just an example of the bugs that we found on that little example application. Or your documentation could look like this, which is a little bit more like a plan looking document. This was created actually with Parveen specifically. But it is not an input to the testing that we were doing. It's an output of the testing that we had already been doing. So in the end of the testing, we can tell the future selves, what did we learn and what were the key potential risks that we discovered while we were testing, and how we now think, being smarter after the fact, how we now think this could be done. So this is one of the ways that you could try doing things in your exploratory testing. And the third way that you could also try, which I quite often suggest to people, is, take whatever programming language. This particular example happens to be Robot Framework, which looks very English-like. So I've been using it on some of my courses, not generally recommending it, but still kind of mentioning it in many cases. This is examples from the specification as 6 tests and 1 idea that came outside the specification, and let's test something empty, and just a way of inputting this stuff and doing verifications automatically. So you can kind of, while you are already exploring, you can use automation as a constraint. It will slow you down a little bit, but so does any form of documentation. And, obviously, this is just a starting point. So you could, use the automation to do unique paths. You could cover new browsers without actually opening a browser manually at all. And you can view things when things fail, kind of like when it stops somewhere, you can kind of like view things at that point and maybe even continue wherever the automation left you off. So there's a lot of things that you can do when you combine automation and exploring. So on this agenda, kind of what we're supposed to do, finding something that someone else have already missed, something that, others probably have already tried testing something. Hopefully it's not kind of like all testing is outsourced to you as a tester, but the developers already tried things. I'm not always sure this is true, but in most cases in my world, this is true. And finding bugs is actually already difficult, and it requires special attention and care. So with this assignment, that's where exploratory testing starts. And with this assignment, in a similar way, you might need to find someone who gives you feedback on what you're missing. If it's no one else, it's gonna be your customer who tells you that, by the way, you missed out on a simple bug that we talked about today at work. You missed out on the fact that if it is winter in Finland, the measurement instrument is gonna be frozen, and there is supposed to be a feature that gives it electricity so that it warms up and the snow melts. And if it's not getting any electricity, because that feature was forgotten, it is going to be a problem that you don't get any of the results because the instrument is frozen when it's -15 and lots of snow on top of the device in Finland, unless there's a heating. But I prefer the idea of giving this feedback, internally. This is from 2013, I think, this Fooled by the Unknown Unknowns. It was a talk that is available online by Alexandra Kasapo. We were working back in 2013 together, and it's just a great reminder for me as someone who is a little bit more senior in the field, with too many years of experience, that, you know, with a couple of conversations, you can turn someone from thinking they're done with 5 relevant pieces of information and bugs, and then kind of, you know, like let them loose again after that conversation, and they can find a lot more of those bugs. So I think the main power of how do we actually grow and how do we learn to do this exploratory testing thing better is that we should be, of course, practicing, you know, having conversations with the application. It's our internal or external imagination. But also we should be having those conversations with our colleagues. So I found this quote this week, and I really like this idea that, you know, if you're doing your introspection always in a solitary format, it's a little bit like daydreaming. So only when you have that human connection where you're explaining the thing, you're debriefing with someone else, and they respond, they have similar stories and similar experiences, and you're both sharing the ideas and like how awful and failing you were feeling when you had that, you know, frozen meter outside in the backyard and none of the functionalities were working anymore. That's when you create those connections in your brain that in the moment of doing exploratory testing come to help you in being again the creative person you're supposed to be, that finds the bugs that are relevant to be, you know, having the conversations on. So again, they are all conversation starters. So they're not absolutes. They're always just conversation starters. And obviously, you know, I need to always remember to say to people that pair testing and actually sharing the activity, that's the best way that I know. Pair and ensemble testing, kind of working together on the same problem in the same space, even if it's a virtual space. That's a brilliant way of noticing that if you have things you don't know, because when you don't know them, you don't know to ask for them. But when you see someone else doing the things in the moment, you can ask, what did you just do? And they can explain it to you. And the next time it makes you so much better. So that's kind of the valuable work there. So then on the final bit on growing and kind of summing this talk and advice up, I come to many of these experiences with the idea that I feel like I need to still grow to some direction. Sometimes I feel very lost with my career. Like, what do I do after 25 years in testing? Do I still want to be a tester? Should I be a quality director? Should I be a principal test engineer? Should I work with many teams, one team? What teaches me and what is beneficial for the organization so that, you know, you can do things that benefit both me and the organization. And it's never easy, but it is even harder sometimes when I get colleagues who are just starting at their very first jobs, or I get colleagues who have, for example, 15 years of experience, but have never had the challenging colleagues that gave me the practice and feedback that I have received during my career that has grown me to the point I am at today. So you usually end up looking at, you know, where the person is, and you grow from wherever you are. So it might be that you don't know nothing yet. Just today, I received news from my summer employee, not last summer, but previous summer. She just got her second raise. So her first raise was a third more in the salary, and now she got another raise, which was now, well, no longer anymore a third in the salary. It was the same sum as before. So now it's about 25% into her salary. So you can grow quite quickly. And she is one of those, you know, like I use her as an example, as someone who is like a contemporary exploratory tester, like really brilliant in putting together automation, documenting with automation, exploring with automation, and the active thinking that looks at all the things that the business needs to know that usually testers bring as that value. So you grow from wherever you are. You might have nothing as a starting point, and you take some piece, And there's so many choices. We can always tailor the work that we're doing, so that kind of the foundation of the work is, something called testing. It might be starting with automation first. It might be starting with, let's not look at the automation first. Let's make first sure that you understand how to design for information that makes sense and is valuable. But, over the years, you'll probably add some stuff about Agile. The Agile by Kent Beck is now kind of like summarized as the XP. I listened to a podcast yesterday where he said that it's basically just two things: rich social networks, how to build really good one-on-one network communications, and short feedback loops, optimizing the, care and feeding of the feedback loops. That's what we want to do. So it's kind of like testing in people. And I think that's kind of exactly what exploratory testing in many ways is. And we are exploring when we're doing Agile. So there's a lot of similarities. But also it might be that you're looking into leadership, and it doesn't mean you have to become a manager. Like, understanding organizations is essential. Like, I put the quote from Anna Baik there. And I think it's actually a brilliant insight that as testers, we're often expected that we don't only do our own work, but we fix the organization to be able to do the work we're doing. And we are actually failing the most when we are not able to fix the organization that needs fixing. So we might need to actually build up those skills as a foundation. We get these new ideas around, continuous releases is the best way to do test management, monitoring and observability testing in production, definitely part of exploratory testing. Why would I stop when I put a feature in production? Like, production is the best ever place to continue my exploratory testing, and understanding what's relevant, kind of like being even able to make those decisions on fixes. Let's start practicing like that. Let's not stop at saying we just provide information, someone else decides. That's a cop-out. Like, that's cheap. I would not recommend doing that. I would recommend start quietly within your head saying, I think this should be fixed. And then start choosing when do you say that out loud. And you will notice that you're actually just as capable of asking that information from the business of why would you decide the other way than I did, and you can learn to make the right decisions, and that gives you a lot of power. So growing every day is kind of the advice. So that's what I had in mind, and I would really love some questions or discussion points if you have any. So I forgot to mention there was the questions area, and I hope you found it somewhere in your tooling in this platform.
Yeah, I think we have two questions actually. First one is from Nermin. He says, should exploratory testing cover parts that are included in regression testing as well, or we can separate these two, not to spend time testing in the same place? So what are your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts are actually that you don't spend much time unless you have much problems. Like, the bugs are the problem that take the time. So it doesn't matter on trying to optimize not being on the same areas. But in a way, you can think of your regression tests as kind of like, it's like a spider web, that it's tingling when there's something to eat. So it's calling you to explore. So it's one of the starting points of exploration is that when you see some of them actually failing because of changes, it's not just, upsetting maintenance when our regression tests start failing. It's actually noticing that there's a relevant change that even the tests are noticing. So I think they're intertwined, so I wouldn't separate them. And it's the same with requirements. You can figure out how you intertwine the requirements-oriented testing with the exploring. So it's kind of like a box, and all the rest happens within it.
Great. Thanks for the detailed answer. And we have another question. It's from Avi. He says, in addition to automated checks, we have a suite of manual regression checks. What are your thoughts on making these regression checks part of exploratory testing so we don't have to have two activities? So basically to avoid duplicate testing.
So sometimes when you have a list and you read stuff from that list, it's hard for you to be creative. And depending on what kind of a person you are when given a list, on how easy it is for you to think outside the box in that moment, you might be able to connect them, or you might actually absolutely have to separate them. I have some people in my team where the separation is absolutely necessary, or the quality of the work won't be good. And I'm just trying to teach them to recognize that they need that, and there's something in their personality that drives them to that. Whereas, for example, for me, combining them is a natural way of doing it. So you think of it as like you're driving a car. You need to decide how fast your speed is so that you don't run the red lights when it's slippery. You need to know your environment, you need to know your own skills, and you need to adapt the way you do things to match how you provide the best results.
Great. Thanks for the detailed answer. That was very insightful. I don't think we have any additional questions. Let's see. No, that's it.
Right. I am on Twitter, or kind of like all the time. So if you have something that you want to ask, just DM me there, and I'm happy to kind of, link with others. And convincing others there's a bit of a project that we're trying to do now with James Lindsay and Mirza and Irja on figuring out how do we actually do an A4 paper to convince some of the managers on this needing to be the way to think around testing. So we have a nice working party on that one.
Yeah, that can take some convincing the manager part.
It might, but then again, you need to remember that I'm a manager to some extent, and I convince managers by telling them that they need to trust me. And they're like, yes, of course, we trust you. Let's do what you need to do. And the results speak for themselves. So make your results visible.
Okay. Thanks, Maaret. This was very insightful and a great presentation. I think we're ready for our next speaker. Oh, there she is. Hey, Larry.
Hi.
Nice to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure. Good to be here. Yeah, I'm Larry Goddard, and I'm here to actually have a chat about how, and more or less not really the how, but the why I decided to create an automation testing framework. So let's just dive into it. First, it started all with a task. The task I had was to get in and test some things with a team. And at the time, it was way back then. At the time, they were using C# and Visual Studio, so it was a lot of overheads and a lot of compiling of a lot of things in the process. And one of the things that made me decided to actually get the idea of coming up with an automation framework was the fact that it was so cumbersome in using what was there. That every time you write some code and you want to run a test, you need to do a whole compilation and then get the test to run. And I just sat and I realized that that's just a wasting a lot of time in getting things done. And thereby the whole concept and idea of why don't I just build a framework that will do what I require it to do. And in doing so, I started to take a look now, and there are many solutions out there. A lot. There are a lot of frameworks. There are a lot of things out there that that I could choose from. And I took a look at some, and I realized that there are a lot of things that is good, but then they won't do exactly what I wanted done. So I still needed to either take it on board and then add more to it. And based on all that, I decided, you know what, just do it for yourself in the end. And so I started to think about how I'm going to do it, how I'm going to design it, and I looked at a lot of different some of the frameworks out there, and that's why I decided, in my head I say, do it something modular. And the reason for doing it modular is that I will have all these moving parts by the time I build this, that I must be able to change things out, because as we all know, things change on the internet like it's so quick. You're using a module to do something now, and time next week, that completely defunct, and there's something new on the market to do a little better, faster. So so I took all that into consideration when coming to create this framework, and it was tough going in the sense that I needed to find something that, one, it could do what I wanted to do. Two, it was easy to get help if I get stuck with something. And so I decided, look at what the developers are them doing, and see what they all comfortable with in the languages, because it was where I were, there were different languages being used. And from research, I come up with the idea of going down the whole JavaScript, Node.js, Selenium route. And that's how, I started putting it together. Now, the good part about it is that what it looked like today wasn't always what it looked like back then. And so I had to find ways to deal with conflicts. I had to find ways to deal with conflicts, and I'm talking about conflicts in coding. So I write a piece of code. John need to look at that code, how best to move things around, and also I needed to look at how the other people in the team could get involved in doing this. And in the end, I came up with something that looked something like this, and that was what this what you're looking at scrolling across the screen as well. My first bell of the framework looked like. It was just one of them things where you kind of put everything in place, make little functions inside there to get things done that you want to do, add bits and pieces to it, and and take it from there, and then had the ability to change things out and fix things. But one of the things I realized in doing that was how it would work in reality when you're actually running, when it's time to actually run some of the tests, and how you could get the results out without outside of being letting it log to your screen. Because if you're running in a CI environment, as we all know, the CI environment will spin up, it will run the issue, it will store everything, but then it spins itself down on the end, and you lose all that test results and everything. So in doing that, I started to pay attention to ease of use and the ease at which somebody could jump in and help on the project to get things done, and also look at how what's the best way to do this, and then have it written somewhere so that in the end, the results, all the results could be stored somewhere that the people who require it, like the testers, the project managers, and all these good people, to get it to look at the result to see what happened, and if anything failed, see how it interacts with everything else. So it was a lot of trial and error in putting it all together, and in some instances, it worked. It looked like what it was, and and then it went on to be all right. So now that we're looking at putting all these little bits and pieces together, then how do we do this? So in the end, we're looking at I started to look at, it was software development team, it's a shared tool set showing the processes, the ability to discover and collaborate effectively with the QA team, and you guys all using the framework to get the testing done. And that was one of the driving force in how it ended up being what it is now. And the whole structural design for it the whole structural design for it is another thing that took place. So if you look on, as I show on the screen there now, I would see like I created it. It had some modules. It had the framework inside there. It had something to do logger. It had a little thing to send out mails. It had a thing to grab the report. And then and all inside there, it had how we was going to put Selenium into it, how I could spin up the grid depending on which machine you're on, one for all Windows machine, one for Linux and Mac machines, getting the standalone server. It was real convoluted and everything. And every time you wanted to move from, let's say, one project to the next, you'd have to create one of these folders and put all that information that is required for that particular thing in it. So I looked at all those things and looked at the effect it will have and the ease in which it would be for the user, which is the QA here, the QA user to actually get the job done. Go there, get the job done, do the testing, and things without having to think about if my Selenium grid is running and did I start it and things like that. So in doing so, it actually sent me back to the drawing board. It sent me back to the drawing board in the sense of having to put it all together in a way that it would be useful and it would be usable and it could be duplicated and replicated across the board for different teams and different QAs at different level coming into play. And that's where I then spent a lot of time in looking at. I went back to the drawing board in the sense I went back and looked at a lot of different boilerplates out there to see how it was and how they are. But one of the things that caught my attention was a lot of the boilerplates, they give you literally a template and they paste some code in it and it will do a particular thing. And then you would take it and then try to work your way around it to get it to do what you wanted. And I wanted something. I tell myself, you know what, this is the opportunity to come up with something much better than what I have out there in terms of testing templates in automation framework templates, and get people to use it, and if they do use it, how easy it would be for them to utilize it in the existing projects, or two, if they're now starting a project, how do I get to use it in a way that will be easy for them to pick it up and to be an easy learning curve for everybody else engaged in it. So in sight of that, and then I also wanted to keep what we were in the whole BDD aspect of it. I still wanted to keep that in it because all the years I've been doing this, and I've been doing this for quite a number of years, 20 odd years to be honest. I'm using a lot of different both commercial and open source tools over the years. And I wanted to keep that whole BDD cucumber kind of thing going because I like it. I know there are people who don't, but I like it, and I decided I'm gonna relook at it, redesign it, and rebuild it in a way that it would use all these existing features that I have out there and make it something really good for today. And then after a lot of coding and a lot of doing and thing, I then came up with something that looked like that. So now this is what you're seeing there now is how the framework evolved and what it is and how it is today. The way it is now, it now comes not just as a boilerplate for anybody that you could take and use. It comes now that if you have an existing project, if you could structure your folder system for your project, just as we see it, as I have it listed here, just like this, then you could just install the framework into it and use it. And that in itself allow it to do what it is today. Like, so in the end, this .env config.rc file, that file that is what, based on everything else, is what will contain all the environment variables, like your project name, your email addresses to the people who are required to get the reports, all your environment variables, like your test and your test and your dev and your pre-prod and your prod environment variables, that everything that's required there. And in there, you would also pass in your what we'll call your Lambda test stroke browser stack variables, if you're using either one of them in your CI for your CI capabilities. And also, if you the way it's done now, I also created what we are called AWS bucket, so that all the report that it generates get pushed to AWS bucket, and then we have a piece of code that extract just the HTML from it and send it out in an email. So you don't get burdened with some heavy HTML files and JSON files. It just comes back to you as a link. I would have liked to show how it looks, but I'm not sure how I can do that. So now just start what I was saying initially. So what I did was I created the framework, and the framework, and what you're looking at on the screen here now is a template, is a complete test suite template. And you can see the folder structure. In this case, you have browser stack, Lambda test, the same features like the structure that was on the screen just now. And if you look at in the package.json file, the dependency is the framework, is the actual framework itself. That's the only dependency that's required. And like any other thing, you can add, if you're doing whatever it is you're working on, you need to add anything else, you just add it in as a normal dependency. Right, and it is as a normal dependency. And the env config file, like I was explaining, as you can see, so we have the environment variables. So your dev environment, the environment name dev, the environment name test, and the different base URLs and API URLs in this instance, and your UAT environment. And you can have all the different environment that you require. And then down here in the data config section is where things like your project name will go. And that is what your project name, and that is what will be used in this case, Lambda test or browser stack or source lab when you're running in the CI environment. So it will pick up what the thing is. And here you have your email data. That is your email list of all the people you want to send this to. If you do run in accessibility in it, then as yes, and it will add the accessibility report to the existing reports that comes out as well, and it will email it. In this section here is just where you will configure. In this case is browser stack. In this case is Lambda test, and any other. And in this case here, AWS configuration data. If you're going to use it where you are and it's recommended if you're going to have big. If it's just a one-off test, that is something that won't generate too much HTML files, then it's neither here nor there. You wouldn't need it. But if you're like where it is now, where I work, this is what they use across the board. I just created a newer version of it for them, and when we run tests, it is run and it is generate a lot report. In the report file, it comes back to be sometime nearly 100 megs because you have HTML files and JSON files, because the report generate both XML, JSON, and HTML. So it all depends on how you want your report to be presented. You have it. So it generates a massive file. So to avoid having to spam off the email that was being run, then I did that. So it pushed everything after the report. It pushed every single thing into the S3 bucket, and then on the test run, it generates and pulls back out just the link, the HTML link in this instance that was required for where it's used, and it pushed back that in an email for you. So you just have to click on a link. So you get a very small email with just some links, HTML links in it, as opposed to all this bulk in files and everything. And the good thing is that it comes built in with a README in it. I'm not sure why the README not showing that part of it. For whatever reason, it's not showing. It's just showing the HTML bit. Mac again, but it says out there on the internet, by the way, in Git. I'll show a next link to it. That brings me back to, let me just stop sharing this. Yeah, and so as I said, so this brings so there you go. So that's the structure, and what just shows how it actually looks inside in the actual usage of it in doing so. And this is about the usage of it after it's all built. So now that it's all built and it's all tested and usable and everything, all that is required for you, the user now who's want to use it, is you just need to ensure. I mean, some of the things on the screen you already know that you would know, but I just put it there for people who are new to the QA world and would like to know what's required on the machine itself for it to be used. And if it goes into install Node.js all globally on the machine, your Java JDK, Git, and Yarn. To do it, just download them, install them, and leave it with the default configuration. That's all it needs. You don't need to do any major other configuration things for it. Install your favorite ID. Then after that, you create a folder to host your files. I like to go in /project so they can stick everything inside there. And then you have two ways of doing it. If you want to play around with the framework itself, then you check out klassi-js.git. You check that out, and inside there it's have a built-in example test that when you run it, install it, you can make sure it's all set up properly, and you can take it from then, and you can put it in if you want to just play with the framework on its own. Now, if you are new to the scene and you want to start somebody that you need to start your test suite, then you can check out the template, and that's what I was just showing you in my ID. You check out Klassi Test Suite, and you can it's a template, so you just clone it and give it your own name as you go along. And in that is just what you just see. It's a complete test suite using the framework in its entirety as a module, as a dependency, and then you could just take it from there. Again, inside it also have a example test. It does a search, so it does a check on an API, so you could know, so it all works and everything. And then you take it from there and start writing your own tests. Now, the underlying thing to all this is that I kind of missed in the previously is that I moved away from Selenium WebDriver itself, and I use WebDriver IO under the hood. So it's still the whole everything no JavaScript thing, but just using WebDriver IO under the hood. Under the hood. The reason I went for that as opposed to continue with Selenium was the ease of how you could write and call functions and things like so. If you want to call, you could I want to call an element. I want to click on a button. I could say browser dot and pass the locator for it, and under the hood, WebDriver will decide if what you pass was an XPath or CSS or a partial name or anything like that to find it. With Selenium, you need to be specific and say, find the element using by X, XPath or by CSS or by partial text, as the case may be. So to get away from that, I just like the way WebDriver IO wrap, put a whole nice wrapper around things, and so that's what I'm under the hood at the moment. And yeah, so that's the end of my presentation per se, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to build my own framework so that I could get away from have a solution that would work for one, it would work in my environment that I am, and two, it would be able to be passed on to others to use, and it would be easy for them to pick up and grasp if they're into the whole JavaScript side of things as opposed to Java, but and things like that, and then too is a ease in terms of how you get help from your developers and them in using it. And one thing I learned over the years is all developers know JavaScript, so it kind of for me it was a kind of a no-brainer to continue using this. So yeah, so there I ended my presentation. So there you go.
Wow, Larry, that was really great.
Thank you.
It was interesting listening to you. I think we have a couple of questions. We can go through them right now. The first one is from Riyadh. He is asking, what would be your tip for people that are junior testers or people interested in testing? How to start and make your way up to automation?
So I didn't hear part of the question. Sorry about that. You drop off.
Basically, he's asking how can junior people and aspiring testers start learning automation? Where to start, basically.
Okay. I think one of the things I tell people is if you want to get into, because you're doing manual testing as it is, and you want to get into automation, start looking at, like I said, some of the templates and them out there, like Classy, like I have a lot of boilerplates out there to look at. Start looking at them and find something that one is comfortable enough for you. And we're talking about from a programming point of view, because you have Java, JavaScript, and stuff. And then I also say pick one of the languages that the developers and the people you're working with can help you. Because it makes no sense you're going to learn JavaScript when everybody else in the company doing Java. Because you'll be kind of isolated. When you have problems, you'll be knocking your head around to come up with it. So yeah, learn something and do something where you could get immediate help from the people you're working closely with.
That's some good tips. We have a next question that's from Maaret. She says, what makes up a framework for you? I'm just your definition of it.
Yeah, what makes up a framework for me is whatever tool I use in, it must be able to do what I need it to do, and let's say and a bit more. And by that I mean, if I'm a QA, so I'm running tests, so I need simple things like it need to generate a report, it need to send out an email, it need to, let's say, take some screenshots and things like that. And if you, so the idea is once you could get your test tool, so let's use the word test tool. If you could get a test tool to do everything that you required, then that is a good enough framework for you. If you could get, you may decide to do accessibility testing, and then instead of having to get another framework, another tool to do all that, it would always be good if you could incorporate that into your existing tool. Makes it easier and less overhead for you as a team in learning.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see the next question. This one's actually from me. When creating a test framework, what advice would you give to avoid reinventing the wheel?
The advice for not reinventing the wheel is that's an easier, as we would say, that's a simple one. Yeah, what we try to do in QA on the whole. I mean, forgetting frameworks, but just QA on the whole. Everything we want to do, it's already there, right? Everything we want is already there. So I would say so take like the approach that I took. I realized what I needed. I look out there and see all what could do it, what it already have, and then I decided, right, this is what I want. So I need this in it, this in it. So I started putting it all together. And that's why I make it so, that's why the framework I built so modular. So if I today or tomorrow, I need something else. I could pull that in as a little module in there. So you don't need to go and reinvent the wheel again. So you have a nice wheel already, and you just add a next spoke to that wheel. And something else come, and you just add a next spoke to that wheel. And the spokes that you have inside there, once one of them get outdated, you remove that spoke and you put the next spoke in. And so you don't need to reinvent the wheel again in that sense. So to avoid it, have something that is modular. So you could take things out and put things in. That way, you wouldn't have to be reinventing the wheel every time something new pops up.
Yeah, so like plug and play.
Yep, plug and play, that's the idea.
Great, thanks for sharing. Let's see the next question. Also from Maaret, have you considered putting all the dependencies inside a Docker, or is it something in the structure you created suggesting that isn't a good idea?
No, the whole idea is that the framework, because the framework it's set like any other module out there, right? The dependency is just that one thing. The framework itself, like I say, you can play around with the framework itself. So the framework itself, like any other tool, like if you look at WebDriver IO, and you just look at it. If you look at the dependencies, they have a whole long magnitude list of dependencies that you just install WebDriver IO, and it will pull everything for you and use it. And that's how I build the framework. So that it have everything in it under the hood already. So when you place it inside your dependency and you install that, everything is there. WebDriver IO, all the different places, it's all already there. So there's no need for pushing it out into like I said, Docker environment, so you could spin it all up on its own and then utilize it. No, it's just one. It's like using any module or node out there that you want to use. Like CrossNav, you just say yarn on npm install CrossNav, and it just install everything. And that's exactly how it is. So there's no need for it in this sense.
Yeah, so Klassi is basically like an npm package.
Yeah, that's what it is. It is an npm package. klassi-js is an npm package, and that's why what I showed the test suite itself is an actual test suite. Let's say a version test suite with just 2 testers in it, and the dependency is that klassi-js package, and it is install npm yarn install or npm install, and it just does its thing, and all you see in your dependencies is klassi-js and the version number. That's it, and everything else is done under the hood.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool framework. I've been trying it out a little bit. Let's see the next question. It's also from Maaret. Can you tell me about the time frame in which you moved from your first example to your current version?
Ooh, let's see. 4.5 years. Excuse me. I decided the first original version was in 2016. 2016 when I did it the first time. And from what you see scroll across the screen and the different thing, it was that. And then as the years rolled by, I realized I need to make it simpler. And it was only last year, early last year. We've been 21. Lose a whole year. Coming to the end of 2019. Yeah, because we lose a whole year. Coming to the end of 2019, I realized, wait a minute, I need to make this an npm package. But because before, like I say, you used to have to check the whole framework out and use it that way. And then I realized, wait a minute, no, you need to make it. This need to be a module. It need to be an npm package. And I spent a couple of months making the whole thing into an npm package, and then of course the testing to ensure that it actually works. And one of the tasks that it had was difficult for me was getting, after you install it as an npm package, getting the use of all the functions and features and things built inside the framework to work inside your in what you call a test suite. And then I tried to figure that out, and I realized, oh, so this is how it's done. And yeah, so it took like 4.5 years, nearly 5 years from there to where it is today.
Yeah, so it took quite some time and dedication to finish the project.
Oh yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time, checking and writing, because it would, you would have the framework running and it will work fine. But then when you check the when you push the framework as a passed as a dependency of your test suite, then you realize, oh, this doesn't work. This is broken. This is not. So it does a lot of thing there. And just as to add, as I say, that the framework itself, I have built it in such a way that it does all the things that is required today. It does API testing. It does the normal functional regression. It does visual. So you can do screenshot comparisons from your stuff, and accessibility to a limited point. So yeah, so it's all built inside there. Yeah.
Like a full stack testing framework.
Yeah, something like that. Well, I mean, it has some little work to be done on it still to improve much on things. But if they're interested in knowing what it have underneath the hood and some of the things, you just look at the actual framework itself, klassi-js on GitHub, and they would see all the packages that is being used to get things done.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting framework. I encourage people to download it from GitHub and give it a try. Just clone the repo and npm install and run it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we have any other questions. Looks like we don't. Okay, if we don't have any other questions, thanks a lot, Larry, for your time. I think we can move on to the next session.
Yeah, thank you much for having me.
Conrad.
Yes,
Great. Thanks again.
Okay, cheers.
Hey, Conrad, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, there's some nice discussion going on in the chat. I was contributing to some of it, hopefully in a helpful way. Let me just share there.
Yep, the stage is yours.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for the invite to the first Ministry of Testing Sarajevo. So the title of this one is "As Tester Doing More Harm Than Good." So it may sound like is there some sort of a critical tone to it, but I often said to people a lot of this is based on context, the things I'm going to talk about, and think about it as a friend who's trying to encourage you in the correct, in a certain direction, let's say. Yeah. Okay. So parenting. As the parent of a toddler, I often wonder if I'm doing harm or good, as per the slide here. Parenting is incredibly subjective. All the parenting books seem to conflict, and the authors often base their books on their own opinions or a small sample of children they've worked with. So I began to get to the point is could I simply do data-driven parenting? I didn't think it was possible until I found a book by an economist called Emily Oster. Now, Emily's background was in economics around healthcare. And then when she had children, she wanted to investigate all the data around parenting. So it was a very interesting read. I'd recommend it to others, and it touches on things like sleeping, vaccines, breastfeeding, all those kind of topics, and a data-driven approach to it. It's very interesting. But that's very, let's say, data-driven, and that's the quantitative side of it. You also wanted a qualitative side to it as well. So we wanted to look at what guiding principles we wanted as parents. So the things we thought about was we wanted our daughter to be respectful, including being tolerant and inclusive, to be independent and resourceful, and to do good rather than harm in the world. So as you can imagine, why I'm talking about these things is a lot of these things reflect on my journey as a tester. Was I doing harm and good? And I also wanted to get to the point in my career that I wanted to see, was there a data-driven approach to software development that would help with quality initiatives? And also as well, could I come up with a set of guiding principles to help guide teams that I lead? But as you can imagine, these are not the kind of thoughts you have on your first day on your first job. So let's have a quick run through some of my testing journey to give some context to it all. Now, my first job was actually working as a junior Java developer as an intern. And then for 3 years, I worked in a role where I was testing embedded systems. So it was normal to do performance testing, to write automated tests. And also as well, I would have done things like test plans, test strategy, and to a certain point ran and created test cases / test scripts, depending on how you describe it. But I left that embedded systems world and went into what I call the executor mode. So I went into the financial world, banking, insurance, hedge funds, all that kind of area. And why I call it the executor phase is that I felt that most of the time it was about execution of test scripts. So I'm going to cover some of the points here, what I felt, I suppose, in a way, it captures what I thought was the executor phase of my career. And the reason why I'm talking about this is hopefully people resonate with the different phases that I'm going to talk about. So the first thing is that the projects were very much waterfall based. And I often think about, things like there was change review boards. So there was a board of people who had to sign off releases and the like, and there was auditors because many of these industries were highly regulated. And I'm going to touch on that point again later in the presentation. That's just why I'm maybe focusing on change review boards and auditors now. There was real silos. There were separate dev and test teams. And for the first probably 7 years of my career, I worked within a team of testers where often we were essentially testing the output of developers. So there was very much silos. It's not as though we ever, that we never communicated or tried to work together, but there was very much a siloed effect. And this probably became more problematic when, there was different physical locations and the like. It probably made it more challenging at times. And as I was saying, it's very much, it was about writing and executing test scripts, and did contracts where I would have not even have written the test scripts, but just executed somebody else's test scripts for maybe months at a time sometimes. The one thing I found is that in this executor phase, the testing was at the end. So it was very much trying to test the quality in, and I will touch on that in a moment. And I often felt that the primary focus was implementation of the functional requirements, and that maybe some of the other requirements weren't given the same priority. When it came to automation, it was often the case that testers, including myself, using tools like Selenium, wrote all the automation at UI layer, so there was no other layers under it. So many of you know the traditional pyramid. So often what the case in these projects was there was a UI layer of automation, but there was no integration, API tests, unit tests underneath it. And to be honest with you, how the software got released to production was a complete mystery. Didn't have access to production or didn't do any form of production testing. And the whole user experience from start to finish was a black hole. It's something I didn't know about and those I worked with knew very little about. And I often feel as well, a lot of these projects, there was a hero culture and I didn't think it was all that psychologically safe as an environment. Now, I want to talk about the harm then, what I saw, the executor phase. Now, as ever, these things need context, etc. But some of the harm I saw was trying to test the quality in rather than building the quality in. People like Elizabeth Hendrickson did a talk and a blog on this over 20 years ago about the limitations of this approach. So a more modern approach, I suppose, is we want to always build the quality in as early as possible. I often felt because testers were at the end of the cycle, it was a case of breaking the software rather than helping others make the software unbreakable. And looking a lot at the test scripts that were written and executed, they used a lot of test techniques like equivalence classes and boundary value analysis, things like that. Things that can very much lend itself to being written in an automated unit test. So by doing that, you free up people to do more valuable testing, different types of testing, as opposed to just one type of testing, which is kind of limiting in ways. And there was an inverted test pyramid, like I was saying. It was kind of a case of automating all the things in Selenium and not taking a more balanced pyramid approach. Now, of course, there was positives as well. I and many others got to hone testing skills, build up relationships with people, and other such positives. Then I moved on to the partner phase of what I would call my career, and others may see this resonate with this one too. So an opportunity came to work with a games company and work as a senior tester. And the role I was doing was e-commerce tester, and it was very different to what I'd seen in the past. This was probably the first time I worked in what I would term a real agile environment, where a lot of the principles of the Agile Manifesto seemed to get played out for the greater part. Here, a tester was a team member, so this was the first time that I wasn't in a team of testers. I was there sitting with the developers, UX people, product people, and we were a team delivering features together. Now, there was no test scripting. There was no test case management tool. And at first, that was a little surprising. And I guess what happens to many people when there isn't that approach, you go a little ad hoc for a while. And eventually, to find something structured and to give a lot of the value that test scripting gave, but to do things in a more rapid way, to move faster, I started to explore exploratory testing. And I suppose one of the things I started learning from that phase is explore all the things with the team and then automate the key flows was one of the big takeaways. In discussions with the team, we'd look at, say, non-functional requirements very early. So we'd often consider things like security and performance, reliability very early, often even before we wrote code, which was groundbreaking to be doing this at the time. And I was testing earlier and with the team. And I suppose this would be whole team testing, and a lot of the things that you'd read about in the agile testing books by Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory would really come true here as well. The automation was at different levels, but separated by role. So we actually had quite a balanced pyramid with different people to different roles. So the developers would write unit tests and integration tests, for example, and someone like myself would be writing often in a language like Python, and be writing API tests and UI tests, again in a tool like Selenium. And it was the first time we got exposure to how the software released. Now, it wasn't DevOps, but it was kind of a starting point to getting into it. So it meant that the developers and the network operations team who did the releases started to work together and collaborate. We also did testing production and started to see the use of feature flags for the first time. To call feature flags or feature toggles, start to see them for the first time, and really got exposure to the UX, the whole user experience. And that company, that first company that I worked for, that I would term as very agile, actually had a lab in one of the offices where customers would come in and they'd use the product and they'd be watching where their eyes were on the screen and all this. So very kind of advanced stuff at the time. And in some cases, probably still quite advanced. And the one thing that I would take away from this is it felt much psychologically safer than anything I'd experienced up to this point in time, to the extent that I was really happy in the role. Those I worked with were happy, and we all wanted to stay there for a long time, which is a really great sign, I think. But even though things were much rosier, there was probably still an element of what we could term harm. The tester is still a safety net for the team in such cases. So, of course, there's context to this. When a team is maturing or when it's new, having a tester in there as a form of safety net can be positive, but over time you want to wind that down. But I guess the mindset there wasn't there thinking like that. The tester was going to be always embedded in the team forever. And there was a big reliance on testers for product knowledge and also for various forms of automation knowledge. And it probably wasn't spread around the team as much as it could be. Now, I think sometimes back at this point, I can only speak for myself, but I still friends with some of the testers from that point. And when we look back on it, we probably think that there was still a desire to control a lot of the aspects of testing, and maybe a lack of trust that the developers could do a good job. We'd all have a very different mindset now, because we'd always see that developers can do a great job of testing and can bring in fresh ideas, and it's great to partner with them. Another thing as well is that majority of automation efforts we've learned now should be led by developers with contribution from testers. For example, even having developers involved in a project means it's twice as likely to be successful. And one thing as well from this period, I guess, is that like there was that kind of mindset of manual or automation. So a lot of the testers were even seen as a manual tester or an automation tester. And I suppose I'd always talk now about balance when I'm hiring people and I'm working with the team I lead. I use terms like coaching and coding, so that you have that facilitation part of your skill set as a tester, but also you have the coding side, and that could be somewhat, your technical part of your game. So that doesn't always mean coding. It might mean that you're a really great API tester with Postman, for example. It could mean different things. But just, I think it's much better when testers have that balance as opposed to being in the manual or automation bracket. I'm not too sure what good it does, really. So now I'm going to take a diversion. Why I'm taking this diversion is that I was an individual contributor for a long time, and then I went into lead and management roles. But that whole thing of making projects successful and figuring out where the good and the harm was always playing in the back of my mind. So I took a whole summer out and I started to consider different approaches. And then I went back to being a senior tester for a couple of years before recently coming back into, say, leading a team again. And some of the things I want to talk about when I take this diversion is, the first thing is about having that data-driven development approach. Accelerate is probably one of the most significant books of the last 10 years, if not 20 years. It was led by Nicole Forsgren as the lead researcher, with Jess Humble and Jean Kim as well. And the research behind it is such a good standard that I got a Chingo Institute publication award, which is basically a gold standard around research data. So thanks to Emily actually for sharing this slide with me and giving me permission to use it, because I think it's a very nice summary of Accelerate. This is a slide that Emily used at Test Bash Manchester 2019. So basically what Accelerate says is there's a certain set of behaviors. You can monitor a certain set of metrics, and that leads to success. Success here being ultimately success for the business. So some of the kind of behaviors that Accelerate focus on is a generative safe culture, lean product management, empowered teams without handovers, modular architecture, and continuous delivery. Now, the performance metrics they speak about are broken into a couple of categories. There's the ones in green here. The first, or the ones to the far left, will be your throughput metrics. The ones in blue, or to the center of the screen, are your stability metrics. And then your service operation was often termed availability in the past, but now that's, since the DevOps reports 2021, they're classing that more as reliability and bringing the topic of availability under the hood of reliability, and having reliability is the all-encompassing term. So what they mean by the throughput metrics is, firstly, is lead time. So lead time in Accelerate terms, the definition is different to what we'd have used in the past. So it's from the time the code is committed to the time it gets to the customer. The deployment frequency is simply how many times do you deploy? Do you deploy your mobile app, number of times a day, a week, a month? Your change fail rate then, that metric focuses on when you make changes, for example, release production, how many times do you have to take action to fix an issue? So how many times must you patch, roll back? So that's your change fail metric. And your time to restore then is when a service goes down, how long does it take, for example, from the time it goes down to bring it back up? And then reliability probably stands for itself, is the fifth metric, which is the reliability of your services, and kind of a modern perspective on that is it includes the performance and scalability of your systems, as well as general uptime. And from a success perspective, from a 2018 conference that Nicole spoke at, I took this screen shot, and it shows that high-performing tech organizations are twice as likely to meet or exceed goals. So Accelerate breaks companies up into elite, high, medium, and low. So even the high-performing tech organizations perform much, much higher. From a technical practices perspective, which is probably where some of the people on the call from a test perspective would like to know more about, you'll see topics here like continuous integration, continuous testing, monitoring and observability, continuous delivery, all the kind of things, that would interest us. And then in the 2019 report, technical practices focus on similar things. Again, you can see here automated testing and deployment automation, other topics like that. So they're the hands-on kind of tactical side of all this. So now I had a data-driven approach to software development that I could leverage and use. So I needed a set of guiding principles. So I looked at the 10 principles for agile testers by Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory, looked at context-driven testing, the 7 basic principles of that by Kainer, Bach, and Petticourt, the 7 Principles of Lean Software Development by Tom and Mary Poppendick, and System Thinking's Principle by Jerry Weinberg and Della Meadow. Both sadly passed away since, but their books are still being read by so many people still today. But the ones we settled on was the modern testing principles, which were created by Alan Page and Brent Jensen. And if you took away a motto from the modern testing principles, it's to accelerate the achievement of shippable quality, which really aligns with Accelerate, because it's saying we want to move at speed whilst also having quality. So speed and quality shouldn't be mutually exclusive. So just to call out the 7 principles then. It's that business first, we help the business. 2 is accelerate the team, we remove bottlenecks. We always learn and improve, so that's the kind of Kaizen, always looking to improve. 4 is leading a quality culture, so leading and maturing the quality culture of teams. The customer is king is that ultimately the customer is the only one who can say if your software solves their problems and if they're willing to pay for that solution. Data trumps intuition is that we rely on data where possible. And 7 is everyone can test, which means that in some teams, or some situations, you may not need a test specialist. So say some of the teams in the company I work for don't have testers and others do. And it's just based on context, risk, and other factors. So back to my testing journey again. So what do I think after the executor phase and the partner phase, what do I think is the third phase? So what the third phase is, I'm kind of where I think we are now as a discipline is it's the influencer. So I think when you know you're in the influencer mode, some of the things that might stand out to you is instead of talking about waterfall or agile, you're probably talking about DevOps concepts and trying to spread a culture of that. Instead of the tester being tied to some of the old tags of automation and manual, the tester simply matures the quality culture of teams. That's the key focus of the tester. So we can move away from some of those traditional titles. There's also a continuous mindset, a testing mindset through whole team effort. So that means that we're always testing at every opportunity and we're trying to do it through the team. We consider all quality characteristics. So we try to move away from the functional, non-functional terms and think about the quality characteristics that are important to a particular feature and to our customers. And we take a holistic view of quality. You know, we've had shift left, shift right. But I guess what we want now is a holistic view of quality, a true end-to-end view of how a customer uses software. And when it comes to automation now, we want that balanced pyramid, but a lot of the evidence from Accelerate and other research would show that it's best when that's developer-led and the tester contributes. And the tester can contribute in many ways, from the ideas that should be automated to pitching in with the automation. But it's just shown that when developers lead automation and pitch it and have a whole team testing effort, the overall product is better, teams are more successful, businesses are more successful. And when it comes to the whole production testing and release, CI/CD is crucial now, and investing in pipelines, automated pipelines. Observability is somewhere where we focus a lot of our effort and investment in now, and where possible, we take a data-driven customer focus. And what underpins all this, and it's called numerous times in Accelerate, is a culture of psychological safety. I have a psychologically safe environment. So often you'll find there's a culture like that, then a lot of these other things fall in place as well. So what are the takeaways from all of that I've covered in the last 20 minutes or so? I suppose one thing is to avoid the 3 S's. So avoid being a safety net where possible. You have to meet with the team where they are. If a team are newly formed or maturing, or the business would consider the high risk context, maybe there's an element of safety net required there through either, testing or various guises of automation. Would be mindful of it. The other thing to avoid is solo efforts. Where possible, be spending your time with others, testing and discussing ideas and collaborating as much as possible. And the other thing is static. Try to move with the times, try to move with where the team are going, and just put aside a certain amount of time every day or week to invest in yourself. The things to move towards is the 3 C's, which is coaching, and that covers things like consultancy approach, mentoring people, all those positive things. And then, of course, collaborating with others as much as possible and embracing change and new ideas. Ultimately, as a tester, there's going to be times when you're the training wheels for a team. Be aware of it and have a plan in place when you want to remove those training wheels. And if there's any questions, I'll happily take them.
We have a question from Riyadh. He says, would you like to redo your whole career path, or would you like to start from the best / easiest part of it?
I wouldn't change anything, because of all the things I've learned along the way. So if I hadn't had all the experiences, I probably wouldn't have opened myself to some of the ideas. Probably wouldn't have embraced the test community to the level I have had. So it would be wonderful to start, with that really, perfect job and all the knowledge, but it's hard earned, isn't it? And you have to go through that. So yeah, in summary, I guess I wouldn't change it. It's a journey I took, and I assume my journey will resonate with a lot of others on this call tonight.
Yeah, it makes sense. The experience kind of shaped you into a tester that you are today. Okay, I got it. Next question is from me, actually. In your view, what's the biggest obstacle in adoption of modern testing principles by the IT companies?
What's the biggest like pushback of the modern testing principles? Is
Yeah.
it?
What's the biggest issue?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of things that come up. So like in summary, the ones that are seen as most controversial is principles 5 and 7. So let's start with 7, which is we may not need a test specialist. So in a lot of organizations, they equate quality to a tester. So they find that very difficult. If you remove a tester from a team or a feature, a wider feature development, they find that very scary and uncomfortable. And the other one that's probably seen as controversial is the 5th principle, which is the customer is the only one who can determine that you're solving their problems and can be the only one who can determine quality. Like what's meant by that is that they're the ones who sign on the dotted line and say, yes, I love this and I'll pay for it. They're not the ones who have to do the penetration testing and the performance testing and all that. So like that's where people think, that the tester will do or the customer will do all the testing. That's not the case. For that 5th principle, that 5th principle is about having built up all those foundations of quality, and a part of having that quality relationship is actually have that relationship with the customer where you're doing beta programs, doing early research, etc. Like so, in summary, I suppose when you're dealing with teams, so like when I took over as the team lead of my current team a year and a half ago, I introduced modern testing principles to them. We did sessions around it, and we talked about principles 5 and 7, and their concerns around that. And then with a wider organization, recently, like I suppose very recently, I've taken one tester outside of an embedded team to be kind of department wide. So that's something kind of new and that the business supported. But they wanted to understand why I'm doing it. And they also sometimes want to understand why all the the teams don't have testers. So I guess I explained that I don't have enough testers to be in all the teams, but also then I explained in a very structured manner why when I say I have 9 teams and currently 5 testers available, why some of those teams don't have testers. So I explain, is it a new team? So new teams having testers is a really good idea. Is it a high risk context? Is this the context that brings in the most money? It can often be good to have a tester there. And then I also highlight, the teams that are very mature in their quality practices. They do that balanced pyramid approach. They are developing their exploratory testing skills. So I say to those teams, like, I can't give you a tester because I can't justify it sometimes because you're doing such a good job with it. So I have to put the testers in the teams then, or where they can, where I can go in and mature the quality culture of those teams. So that was a very long-winded answer. I hope I hit the points there. If not, please ask for clarification or give me
Actually,
feedback.
that was very helpful. Thanks.
Okay.
I think we got a couple more. Next we have from Maaret. Can you skip the steps so that the next generations trust our word and start with your 3rd role, or do you need the experience of the others?
It's really interesting. Yeah. So the way I look at that is the kind of topics that come up around this, like, is what do you do with junior testers? Like, so how can you get them into that kind of role if they've no experience? And the other thing is what you do with new hires. Like, so I suppose the way I look at it is I've grown the team a little bit over the last year and a half, and I'm going to grow it more. There's 2 new people joining before the end of the year. So if you can imagine, when I'm bringing them into the team, when I'm onboarding them and teaching them where I want them to go, what I'm doing is focusing on that third role, that influencer role. So I'm covering a lot of the things I talk about. I'm going to talk to them about Accelerate. I'm going to talk to them about the modern testing principles. I'm going to ask them to read Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory's book, Agile testing condensed as a starting point to read Elizabeth Hendrickson's Explore It. And also as people, like Maaret was here tonight. She's a thought leader on, ensemble testing, which I still call mobbing, and exploratory testing. And then people like Larry here tonight with automation. They need those automation skills as well. But trying to get them into the thought, get them thinking about it and get them in the mindset that we don't want to automate everything. It's like, what are the key things you're going to automate? And if you are going to do something end to end, can you do it in an API way perspective as opposed to UI layer? And are the developers helping you by building a lot of those foundations? Are they building out UI tests and getting involved at all the levels of the pyramid on the automation side of things? So I would say that even if most of the people I have are either mid or senior, but I took a junior in the morning, I'm going to put them into a team and leave them get that real world experience, but I'm going to keep pointing them towards that third role, even though I think in reality, they're probably going to be in the first or second because they need to be there and get those foundations before they can get all the way to being that influencer role to build up that confidence. But I'm going to be nudging them very gently and encouraging them towards that influencer role from the very early days of their career.
Great. So basically, they need some guidance, but some of the things they need to do on their own.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one more question. Let's see. It's also from Maaret. I have one team now here, and I had testers removed, but the problem is that customers became reporters of the problems. We can deal with it for a while. Do you have any ideas how to enable them to act on the responsibility better?
Oh, so the team, how to get the team testing more, is it? I think is what you're saying, Maaret, is it?
The team no longer has testers, and they had lots of bug reports from customers, and how to make sure the team takes quality more seriously. That's how I understood the question.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, no worries. So one of the things about the modern testing principles, and something that gets lost, I think, along the way is, and it's a roundabout way of answering your question, is that it's nearly thought that principle 7 is we don't need testers, so let's pull all the testers out and that's it. But if you listen to the podcasts and read the blogs and watch, say, Alan talks a lot in the conference scene, it's all about getting the team ready to pull the tester out. So maybe sometimes is a tester pulled out when the team weren't mature enough. So if a tester is doing all the testing and they're the safety net and you take them out and the team isn't ready, that can lead to problems like that. So essentially then it's getting the team to be more focused on those problems. So there's a number of ways you can do that, but having a tester maybe coach them a little could be good if you can't have a full-time tester with them. And there's nothing like the developers getting together and actually looking at the production issues and the problems that are coming in and trying to come up with solutions for it. They're the kind of things I go for. I'm a big fan as well of learning through blameless postmortems and also using retrospectives. So I think they're the two most valuable ways of learning. So, for example, if we have a production incident in our company, pretty much the day after, a post-mortem will be run, but it's very much a blameless post-mortem. It's like, okay, the problem occurred, but how can we learn from it and move on? So by having maybe mini post-mortems of the customer issues could help the team as well. But as ever, I suppose you need to know all the detail and the context to know it. But sometimes, I suppose in summary, I'd say sometimes is the team ready? Is the capabilities of that team in relation to their ability to deliver on quality mature enough to pull a tester out or not? And if you pull them out too early, then that can lead to problems. And that is also, I think, where the modern testing principles are I don't know, misunderstood sometimes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. I think we have 3 questions left. Next one is, have you managed to implement modern testing principles with the dev team that you have worked in, meaning that use a data-driven approach? This one's from Elvir.
Yeah, so it's something we need to grow and improve. So before I was the lead, I worked with 2 teams, a context team and a mobile team. So with that context team, we really started to mature. I was very lucky that the lead was very strong in analytics. So before we released a feature, we used used to look at it from a user journey perspective and say, look, this is the user journey now, and this is what we want the user journey to be. And we data analytics to help us drive that. So at one point we were changing a feature that we wanted a customer to click on a certain area of the product, and that would highlight a list of properties. And what that meant is that they didn't have to call customer support. So we were looking at the data analytics to see that they were flowing through to the part of the feature that we wanted them to. And also we were looking at customer calls around that feature. And what we noticed in the analytics was the customer was flowing in to the part of the product we wanted to. So we knew that our feature was successful, and also the customer calls for that each area reduced. We also use, the high level perspective now. We're looking at cross-browser testing recently, and I'm looking at having a set of browsers we support, and like the data that I have, we use Pendo and Google Analytics, but like both data sources show that 2 browsers cover 80 to 90% of our audience, and that's very useful for making that decision about which browsers we should support, where we should put our focus, especially if we want to automate cross-browser testing, where is our starting point. So, but has this spread across our organization? No, it's a work in progress. It's something I encourage the teams to do. And if any of you use the Quality Culture Transition Guide, which is a way of implementing the modern testing principles in teams and developing the culture, there's 9 capabilities, and one of them is using data analytics. So it's an area of improvement that I want to do. And maybe if you explore that, you might find that it's an area that you need to develop in your own company too.
Okay, thanks for sharing the insights. Let's see. Next question, also from Elvir. He says, have you managed to implement modern testing principles? Oh, I think the wrong question got marked as answered.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, let me just try to find it.
It's still there. So have you managed to implement modern testing principles? Is that what you just answered?
Yeah, that's the one that got answered.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my intention to answer that one anyway. Hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah, there is another one, sorry.
Yeah.
It says, how do you balance requests on new features from, for example, a product owner versus what you learn from your data collection? How do you prioritize?
So how do you balance requests on new features versus what you learn in your data collection? Like, I don't see it as mutually exclusive. Like, so what you want to do is prioritize your most important features and build up that relationship with the product people. They can be, product owners, product managers, whatever it be. And then it's using the data analytics to show what's what way it can work. Like I was talking about that user journey. So that's one way of looking at the data and looking at the highest priority list of features. The other thing you can do, like working with your product owners, is they may ask you to make a change to the product. One thing you can do to help around that is use the data. So the product owners say, we want to make this change. Now they'll really be glad if you give them feedback on the analytics around it. So if they say, we want to make this change to this feature and it needs to be, made in a number of places, if you give them the feedback that like 90% of your customers access that feature through a certain screen or page, and that it could be removed from the other pages, and that'll make the code more maintainable and actually make the feature implementation much faster, they'll be grateful for that as well. So I guess what I don't think it's an either or. It's not like you got a list of features versus what you learn. It should be very much a collaborative relationship with your product owner, and assisting them with this data. And often from what I see, your modern product owner / product manager often use the data anyway, and they'll often bring the data to the team to actually support their case for why something should be implemented. So often it's actually, what I find is your modern product person will actually bring the data to the team and say, these are the options available to us, and that's the way it should be. Like, I think that kind of, for a better term, that old school project manager stuff is kind of getting eroded, and we're seeing a much more modern product person, I think is how I'd put it.
Yeah, that is kind of a trend nowadays. Okay, we have, I think, one question left. It's from Avi. He says, this is all good, but how do you roll this out to the team /org? Before sprint, during sprint, and etc. Maybe it's a good topic for the next meetup. Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so it's just good. How do you roll this out to the team or the org? So I've been with this company 5 years, and like when I came in, they were at a place where they were kind of slowing down their releases to actually invest in automation, all the way up the pyramid. And some of the things we were exploring back then was whole team testing, getting all the developers to pitch in, and slowly but surely over time we've gone after one thing after the other, you know, if you know what I mean. So things we've gone after is performance testing. You know, we wanted to mature that, and that's, you know, done now in all our key projects. And there's other aspects of this that we've done that we've done over time. Like, so what I'd say is that, like, because I've been here for 5 years, it's probably I've seen the progress of it over time, but it's a kind of it's a case of experimenting, see what works, be patient, getting support from management. In a sense, I have a great relationship with my own manager, who, you know, has a great relationship with the director of engineering then. So I use that to kind of get a lot of my ideas in, and they're very open to it. But I would say that 5 years ago, if I thought where we are now in relation to our perspective on quality and how we operate, I probably couldn't believe where we are now. So sometimes it's, you know, you're going to get wins quickly sometimes, but, you know, that's probably the outliers. Most of your wins are going to come slow. So you just have to decide what you're going to go after. You know, what's really important to you right now, and that's what we did bit by bit. Like, we knew we had to invest in automation a couple of years ago. We knew we needed to bring in whole team testing. We needed everybody pitching in. Like, we brought in mobbing over time. I introduced bug bashes, and they're very popular now, you know, getting people together. You know, all those different things. Like, it's not as though we introduced them all overnight and just overwhelmed people. We just said that every quarter or so we were going to bring in something new, you know, do the presentations, get the management support, and work through that. So I should summarize that by saying, prioritize what you want to go after, get management support, you know, get people who support you, do presentations. There'll be people out there who will be very eager to support you. All those good things, yeah. So it won't happen overnight for you, but you know, keep plugging away, and it'll happen.
It's a long-term journey, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just check. I don't think we have any more questions. Yeah. Well, we're almost out of the allotted time anyway, so I think we can wrap it up since we don't have any questions. I'd just like to thank all the speakers for taking the time and supporting the new meetup. It means a whole lot. And thanks everyone for attending. I hope you had fun and learned something new, and see you at the next meetup, I hope, very soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.